So with that, I'd like to welcome up our keynote speaker, Sachin. He's a very good friend of ours at Plug and Play. He's been a partner for the last couple of years. Saeed always says he's the CTO of USPS, but he's leading innovation at the company, and it's been a great partnership to see the U.S. Postal Service figure out how to work with startups. As I know, there's been some challenges along the road, but we've overcome it, and I think this has been a very great partnership so far.
Thanks, Mike. So we've been engaged with Plug and Play for a couple of years, and what's funny is even now Mike has a sense of surprise when he says even the USPS is looking at innovations. So he said we were running a little late, so hopefully my presentation is going to help us catch up. It's pretty quick. What I wanted to briefly share is how we think about external innovation specifically. What are the consumer preferences, how they're changing, and how that's translating into what we see is a slight change in the structure of the industry. Well, it's actually not slight, but the change in the structure of the industry. So I'm going to use the lens of last mile logistics. That's what we know. But then once we talk about changing structures, we'll get into perhaps a little more generic, industry language. So, if you think about consumers ordering packages online, think about your favorite e-commerce site and think about you receiving a package. Very often, you'll do the one-click shopping. You'll get the package as it, whenever it gets to you. However, there's also an option for you to pick, to have a lot more control over when the package is delivered. You could pay a couple of extra bucks, get it a little sooner, actually get paid a couple of extra bucks, into maybe your Audible account or something, get it a little later. You can get it delivered to your house. You can get it delivered to an alternate delivery location. These are all variables in a level of control that consumers are now starting to expect. It's no longer as simple as consumers who fit a certain profile will behave a certain way. Their preferences are based not just based on their profile, but on the profile of the package that you're getting. Right? So you don't want your wife's birthday present to arrive at your doorstep the day before her birthday, right? So what can you do to make sure it gets delivered to the local dry cleaners 2 days before? So all of those elements of control essentially make last mile delivery a really complex and a fairly messy space because all of those options now need to be available to consumers. Control is enabled essentially by three drivers, and the first of those is speed. And speed, I think of speed as falling into two broad buckets. The first is getting it from point A to point B. Right? So how quickly can I get a package from where it resides today to where it needs to get to? There are a whole bunch of variables that determine that in itself. So where does point A need to be? Right? So we're seeing changes in urban warehousing. Where we used to have these massive consolidated warehouses, we're starting to see fragmentation. We're starting to see shipping from store. Right? So you place an order, you go to Zara.com, you place an order, and it's quite possible that the dress you're getting is actually getting shipped from the local Zara as opposed to some warehouse, some distribution center 200 miles away. And so that's one element of speed. The other element of speed is just being able to move it faster. Drones, autonomous vehicles. It's disambiguating the mode of transport from traditional points of efficiency. Right? So we're starting to see a whole bunch of changes in those factors as well. The other element of speed is how quickly you can respond to changes in consumer preferences. If I decide, for example, today that I've placed an order, but I did the one-click checkout, but I should have gotten it delivered somewhere else, not my default location. I want to go back. How quickly can I respond to that? And the biggest enabler for that is visibility, which is the second big enabler, right? So both the consumer and the shipper need to have visibility of where that package is at any point in time. Because without visibility, speed can lead to chaos, right? So everything's just moving faster. You just don't know where it is. And so that visibility is enabled by a whole data ecosystem around. We're seeing APIs. We'll actually see a few startups today who focus primarily on providing that visibility across the value chain. One of the platforms that the U.S. Postal Service has built over a few years, it's called Informed Visibility. You can essentially get up to a 4-minute delay. You can track essentially any package through a fairly complex system of nesting and tracking, et cetera. The Informed Visibility is available as a platform to anyone who ships or mails with the U.S. Postal Service. And the last of the three enablers is cost, right? So 2-day shipping used to be table stakes. It was no longer a competitive advantage to offer free 2-day shipping. It was a competitive disadvantage to not offer that. The implications of that are that as a merchant, that the cost pressure to provide that service is very, very high. You cannot actually afford to have that becoming a massive line item or a line item that outstrips the revenue stream that you are aiming to get from these new channels. And so the cost pressure on being able to provide shipping as a service is very, very high. Now, if that's further complicated by the fact that you have to have the speed, you have to have the visibility, you have to have that extra infrastructure to enable all of these new consumer preferences. And so these are the big changes that we're seeing, and I think it's pretty universal, in consumer preferences that are driving some of the big changes in industry structures. So where traditionally industries like retail were very simple reseller models where a retailer would buy low, sell, have a margin, and sell a little higher, that structure is no longer a viable structure. And that's where it's starting to move into more of an ecosystem where every retailer or most industries are starting to become more of an ecosystem where there are certain value-added services that retailers or companies are working with. They're looking at distribution service providers. The speed of change is so high that it's impossible or next to impossible for a single entity to provide all of these services, all of this by themselves efficiently and at scale. And so that's part of what's leading to the breaking up of this one monolithic structure into a bit more of an ecosystem. It's both the diversity of services that needs to be provided and the speed of change that companies need to keep up with. So that's part of the reason where traditionally we at the Postal Service have had innovation, product development, et cetera. We're now looking a lot more externally to provide some of the cutting edge services to at least inform us of what are the trends, what's coming, what's around the corner or further down the horizon in terms of what should we be looking at, what should we be getting ready to address. So again, coming back to some of the startups you're going to hear from today, a lot of them provide services in one of these 4 buckets. And they, as complements to existing incumbents in the larger players in existing industries, be it logistics or retail, et cetera, are really looking to enhance the value that their customers or the final consumer is able to extract from their relationship. Now, as an incumbent, as somebody who's been in the space, in the U.S., we've got a significant footprint. What are the strategic options we have when we think of our role in an ecosystem? So there are companies who do decide to play solo, but for that you need to have either a sustainable competitive advantage or really, really deep pockets. And there's not a lot of companies that kind of fit that mold. And just based on everything else I've said so far, you probably can imagine, I don't think that's a viable strategy. The one company that I can think of that comes close to that is probably Tesla, and just because they're able to do a lot of it internally. The second is participating in an ecosystem. Now, the one thing I should clear is that I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So, for example, we participate in this ecosystem, right? And because innovation is not our core purpose, but innovation is an enabler for our business. So we participate in this ecosystem. But I'm focused more on, as a core function, do you participate in an ecosystem? So if you think about it, Toys R Us, them participating on an Amazon ecosystem, was one example where that may not have worked the best for them, but there's probably viable options for that. I think that from my point of view, the two, if you're an incumbent, the two most viable opportunities are participating in an open ecosystem, building an open ecosystem or building a proprietary ecosystem. And to give you an example, the biggest proprietary ecosystem is probably Amazon at this point, or one of the big ones is probably Amazon, where we would think, I would think of us as a big open ecosystem where anyone who has shipping needs, anyone who has mailing needs, can essentially partner with us or work with us to develop services around that. The sell option essentially is, if you're a Whole Foods, you decide, look, it's probably best to extract value for your shareholders at this point in time and to exit the industry. So also, I think there's perhaps a bit of a continuum over here, where if you think about Amazon's logistics business, that was closed, that was probably a proprietary ecosystem that is available only to those who are participating as a seller on the Amazon platform. But once they start hiving it off as an open platform, it becomes available as an ecosystem. So that's kind of all I have. This is where we see some of these industry structures going, where we see some of these changes. We're tracking this, we're participating in this, and we're looking forward to hearing more from some of the startups and the other corporates over here.